The colony's central square buzzed with nervous energy as the towering, insectoid forms of the HFY delegation emerged from their gleaming obsidian vessel. Their carapaces shimmered under the twin suns of Perseus, 9, each movement a precise, predatory calculation. Around them, human colonists watched in tense silence, knowing that first contact was always a gamble, one that history had proven could end in either diplomacy or devastation. Lieutenant Ava Rodriguez took a measured step forward, resisting the urge to glance at her husband. Sergeant David Kane stood several paces behind her, hands clenched at his sides, the disciplined stillness of a seasoned warrior radiating from him. She knew he hated situations like this. Negotiation was not his arena, but she also knew that if things turned south, there was no one better to have at her back. The lead HFY warrior, a hulking brute of chitin and muscle, stepped forward. His name, translated through the colony's linguistic database, was Kvor, and he carried himself with the arrogance of a species that had never lost a war. His mandibles clicked, his multifaceted eyes narrowing as he studied Ava with unsettling focus. "You are their leader?" Kvor's voice was a low, resonant growl. Translated through the colony's comlink system, Ava inclined her head. "I'm the chief diplomatic officer of this colony. We welcome you to Perseus, 9. Kvor let out a noise that might have been a laugh. "Unwise." He stepped closer, looming over her. "Your species is untested. You expand, yet you do not fight. You build, yet you do not conquer. What claim do you have to this world?" Ava kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. She had read the reports. HFY culture was built around strength, hierarchy, and subjugation. To them, civilization without conquest was a contradiction. "Our claim," she said evenly, "is that we've settled here in peace. There's room enough for both our species to—" A sharp chittering interrupted her. Kvor's mandibles flared. "Your words are hollow." In a flash of movement too fast for the human eye to follow, his arm lashed out. A massive, clawed hand struck Ava across the face, sending her sprawling onto the ground. The crowd gasped. A murmur rippled through the gathered colonists. For half a second, the world seemed to pause. And then David moved. He was on Kvor before the HFY had even retracted his arm, his body a coiled spring of violence. He struck with brutal efficiency, an open palm thrust to the alien's throat, a pivoting step to wrench Kvor's extended arm behind his back. There was an audible crack as the alien warrior crashed to his knees, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. The watching HFY let out sharp, discordant hisses of alarm. The human colonists were silent, frozen between fear and awe. David leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "Touch my wife again, and I'll rip your damn arm off." Kvor let out a ragged breath, struggling against David's hold. His multifaceted eyes darted toward Ava, then back to the sergeant. This male is your warrior." Ava, still dazed but regaining her composure, pushed herself to her feet. Blood trickled from her split lip, but she wiped it away with the back of her hand. "My husband," she corrected, her voice edged with steel. "And you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Kvor's body trembled, not in pain but in realization. He had assumed that Ava, as the one who spoke first, was the dominant force among these creatures. That was how it worked in his own culture. The strong led, the weak followed. But now, this unknown factor, this silent male, lurking in the background, had moved like a predator, had broken him in seconds. The HFY warriors in the delegation stirred, muttering amongst themselves. They had misjudged these humans. Slowly, Koreth's mandibles curled inward, a sign of humiliation. "I demand a trial of supremacy," he rasped. Ava frowned. "A what?" One of the other XY theory, slightly smaller but clad in the insignia of an official, stepped forward. His voice was smoother, more refined. "A formal combat challenge. A single duel to determine the fate of your colony." David scowled. "You're telling me we either fight or die?" The official inclined his head. "Fight or submit to XY theory rule." Murmurs of shock rippled through the humans. Commander Elena Vasquez, who had been watching silently from the perimeter, finally stepped forward. She was a woman of sharp eyes and sharper instincts, and right now, she was assessing the situation like a chessboard. "And if we win?" she asked. The official hesitated, then spoke with measured deliberation. "We will acknowledge humanity's right to remain, and reconsider our stance on your species." Ava's hands curled into fists. She had spent years working for peaceful relations with alien civilizations, only to have it come down to this, another trial by combat, another species that saw violence as the only currency worth trading. David, however, was already rolling his shoulders. "Fine," he said. "I'll fight." Ava turned sharply. "David, wait." No, his voice was steady. "This isn't diplomacy anymore. It's war." He turned back to the XY theory. "You want a trial? You got one." Koreth's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. Despite his defeat, he seemed almost eager now. "The duel will take place at dawn," the official declared. The XY theory turned, retreating back to their vessel with a strange, ritualistic grace. As soon as they were out of earshot, Commander Vasquez exhaled sharply. "Well, that went hell fast." Ava's head was still spinning. "You think?" Danny O'Reilly, one of the colony's more unpredictable residents, let out a low whistle. "Guess they didn't realize they just punched a Marine's wife." David shook his head. "They didn't realize we don't fight fair." A slow, determined grin spread across his face. Tomorrow, the XY theory would learn exactly what that meant. The war room inside Colony Perseus 9's command center was cramped, filled with the low hum of hollow displays and the sharper hum of tension. A rotating projection of Koreth's physiology hovered above the central table, bathing the gathered team in cold blue light. Commander Elena Vasquez paced beside it, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "Let's get one thing straight," she said. "This isn't just about David winning. It's about making sure humanity walks away from this duel looking like a species they don't want to screw with." David Kane leaned against the table, arms thick as tree trunks folded across his chest. "No pressure," he muttered. Dr. Felix Patel, the colony's lead scientist, adjusted his glasses and studied the alien anatomy floating before him. "It's a miracle you didn't break your hand when you hit him, Sergeant." He tapped the image, enlarging a cross-section of Koreth's exoskeletal plating. "Their natural armor is almost as strong as ceramic composites. We need to assume conventional strikes won't do much." David exhaled through his nose. "So punching him is out." "Great." Santiago Sandy Morales, head mechanic and resident optimist, leaned in, a crooked grin on his face. "Not unless we even the odds. Ever use an exo-rig in a fight?" David eyed him. "Only for heavy lifting." "Well," Sandy said, rubbing his hands together, "let's change that. The strategy begins." Vasquez pointed at the projection. "We have less than 24 hours before the fight. Koreth's expecting us to play by his rules. Strength against strength. We're not giving him that." Felix nodded. XY theory culture is built on predictable combat rituals. They train for direct engagements, not unpredictability. Danny O'Reilly, lounging in the corner, snorted. So we gotta hit him where he's not expecting it. You ever see a bar fight, Doc? Most guys lose because they think it's about throwing the hardest punch. It's not. It's about being dirty, fast, and making the other guy think he's already lost. Vasquez smirked. Congratulations, Danny. You just became David's fight trainer. Danny grinned. Finally, someone appreciates my talents. Training the human way. The makeshift training ground in the colony's cargo bay was littered with reinforced dummies, sparring mats, and scattered equipment. Sandy and his team worked tirelessly on a lightweight exo-rig, modifying it for rapid movement rather than brute force. Meanwhile, Danny squared off against David, cracking his knuckles. First rule of street fights, no honor. Second rule, feints. Make M think they're winning, then flip the table. David smirked. You think I don't know how to fight? Danny rolled his shoulders. You know how to win a fight. I'm going to show you how to steal one. What followed was an hour of unconventional lessons. Dirty tricks, psychological warfare, and sleight-of-hand combat tactics. Danny demonstrated a sudden stumble that turned into a knee strike. A fake-out punch followed by a thumb to the eye. Distraction techniques designed to keep an opponent off balance. David, for all his discipline, struggled at first. His training as a Marine had ingrained direct, efficient combat into him. But soon, he started to see the value of deception. By the time the session ended, Danny grinned. Not bad, Kane. I'd say you fight like a drunk now. David wiped sweat from his brow. That's a compliment. Best kind. The wild card. Felix, meanwhile, was focused on biology over brute force. He tapped on his holopad, bringing up the HFY nervous system. They have a secondary neural cluster here. He pointed to a section near the base of Korath's neck. It's not quite a weakness, but a strong enough shock will cause temporary paralysis. Sandy cracked his knuckles. So we build something to hit him where it hurts. Felix smirked. Exactly. I'll rig up a stun gauntlet, a concealed system that releases an electrical pulse when he makes contact. David raised an eyebrow. And when he scans me for weapons? Vasquez leaned forward. That's where we cheat. Danny laughed. Oh, I like this plan. Moments of humanity. Later that evening, the team gathered in the mess hall, the weight of the next day hanging over them. Despite the looming fight, spirits were high. Danny exaggerated a retelling of David's failed first attempt at a feint, mimicking his stiff movements to howls of laughter. Even Felix, usually the most serious among them, cracked a rare smile. Sandy raised his cup. To humanity, we don't fight fair, but we fight to win. Glasses clinked, but beneath the laughter, there was an unspoken understanding. Tomorrow, everything was on the line. David clenched his fist. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his people, for Ava, for humanity's right to stand as equals. And he had every intention of winning. The dawn of Perseus, 9 crept over the horizon in bruised shades of violet and amber. A crowd of humans and exoetheri gathered in the open coliseum of the alien visitors. A circle of scorched earth surrounded by jagged black spires that hummed with latent energy. The air was thick with anticipation, punctuated by the occasional chittering of the insectoid warriors. David Kane stood at the center of the arena, rolling his shoulders beneath the customized exorig Sandy had built overnight. It was a lightweight skeletal frame designed to enhance mobility rather than brute strength. Because if Kor got a hold of him, there'd be no prying the XY warrior off. Opposite him, Kor loomed like a living tank. His iridescent carapace gleamed under the morning light, a monstrous fusion of organic armor and brute force. He flexed his clawed hands, mandibles twitching in what might have been amusement or hunger. Ava Rodriguez stood at the sidelines, arms crossed tight. She was trained for diplomacy, but she never felt more powerless. Her heart clenched every time she looked at David, but she forced herself to focus. She had to trust him. Nearby, Vasquez, Danny, Felix, and Sandy stood ready. Each had played a part in stacking the deck, and now all they could do was watch the cards fall. A HFY Theory efficient raised a three-pronged staff and let out a resonant click. The translation module in the human's comms activated. The trial of supremacy begins, and then Core moved. The first exchange. David barely had time to react before the HFY warrior was upon him, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Core's first strike was a downward blow meant to crush. David dodged left, narrowly avoiding the impact. Dust and rock exploded where the strike landed. Fast, David muttered. Core pivoted, sweeping a leg out in a motion unnatural for something his size. Adaptable, but David was already airborne, using the exo-rig's minor assist thrusters to vault over him in a controlled somersault. He landed smoothly, skidding back into a ready stance. Core's mandibles twitched. Interesting. David smirked. You have no idea. Psychological warfare. Core lunged again, this time using his forearms to box David in. The HFY Theory were brawlers by nature, using relentless offense to overpower foes. David, however, had studied the openings. He let Core think he had control, deliberately stumbling backward like an amateur, just enough for the alien to commit to a full-force follow-up strike. And then, at the last moment, David twisted his body and dropped low, spinning into a sweeping kick. His enhanced exo-rig gave the move extra force, sending Core crashing onto his back with a resounding thud. The watching HFY Theory hissed in shock. Danny whistled from the sidelines. Damn, I taught him that move. Core, to his credit, didn't stay down for long. He surged to his feet, eyes gleaming. You fight differently than your mate, Core rumbled. David smirked. She talks. I break things. Core laughed, a guttural, clicking noise. Good. And then he attacked in earnest. The real fight begins. David knew the HFY Theory could adapt quickly, but experiencing it firsthand was something else. Core abandoned brute force, shifting into a more fluid, unpredictable attack pattern. His strikes became feints, his movements deceptive. The bastard had learned from watching David. David barely dodged a blow that could have shattered his ribs. His exo-rig whined under the strain, servos recalibrating to keep up. The fight was becoming a chess match of violence, both fighters adjusting with every move. Then Core's clawed fingers grazed David's left arm, finding purchase. A mistake. The modified stun gauntlet activated, sending a jolt of high-voltage electricity straight into Core's secondary neural cluster. The HFY Theory locked up mid-motion, frozen in temporary paralysis. Gasps erupted from the crowd. The HFY Theory warriors hissed in alarm. David didn't waste time. The decisive blow. He launched himself forward, using his exo-rig's assist to propel his knee straight into Core's abdomen. The impact cracked exoskeleton, sending the warrior skidding back. David landed in a ready stance, fists raised, breathing hard. Core staggered, mandibles clicking erratically as his nervous system rebooted. For the first time, the HFY Theory warrior looked at David with something dangerously close to respect. Slowly, Core straightened. The crowd held its breath. And then he dropped to one knee. The HFY Theory surrender posture. A hush fell over the gathered warriors. The efficient clicked his mandibles. The human is victorious. The silence was shattered by the roar of the human colonists. Danny punched the air. Hell yeah, that's our boy. Sandy whooped, lifting Felix off the ground in a bear hug. We did it. Ava exhaled, closing her eyes for a beat before rushing toward David. He barely had time to catch her before she wrapped her arms around him, pressing her forehead to his. You reckless, impossible, brilliant man. David grinned, tilting his forehead against hers. You married me? She smirked. Yeah. Remind me why. Because I'm really good at fighting aliens. She laughed, kissing him hard. Aftermath. Kvor rose slowly, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. He approached David and Ava, then inclined his head, an unmistakable gesture of acknowledgement. You are not what we expected, Kvor admitted. David smirked. We get that a lot. Kvor let out a deep, rumbling chuff. Perhaps we have more to learn from your species. Vasquez stepped forward, ever the strategist. Then let's talk about that. The tension that had loomed over the colony for weeks began to fade, not into absolute peace, but into the promise of something new. Tomorrow, humanity would still be standing. And now, the XY theory knew better than to ever underestimate them again. The tension in Colony Perseus 9 had shifted, not vanished. Humans and XY theory weren't about to become best friends overnight, but transformed into something new, uncertain, and full of possibility. David Kane sat on the colony's outer rampart, staring at the alien skyline. The XY theory ships, towering and insectal, still loomed on the horizon, but their presence no longer carried the weight of an impending war. He stretched, wincing at the deep ache in his muscles. Beating an alien warlord in single combat had its price. Ava approached, 2 steaming cups in hand. You look like hell, she said, handing him one. David took a sip, hot, strong, definitely not coffee inside. You sure know how to sweet-talk a guy. She smirked, nudging his shoulder. I meant it in a rugged, heroic way. They sat in silence for a while, watching as humans and XY theory mingled cautiously in the distance. The aliens still moved with an air of superiority, but there was something different in their posture, respect, maybe even curiosity. Ava spoke first. Kvor requested a diplomatic meeting with Vasquez. David raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect that. She chuckled. Neither did she. I think she was halfway to ordering another round of turret calibrations when the request came through. David smirked. Guess that means I did my job. Ava turned to him, her expression softening. You did more than that, David. You didn't just win the fight. You changed the game. New alliances, old rivalries. Down in the colony's central hall, Vasquez stood across from Kvor, flanked by Felix, Sandy, and Danny. The XY theory warrior was no longer in his battle armor, but even in a more ceremonial robe, he exuded power and presence. I underestimated your kind, Kvor admitted, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. That will not happen again. Vasquez folded her arms. I'd say that's the smartest thing you've said so far. Danny coughed. Ma'am, maybe let's not insult the 6'5" murder insect right after we made peace. Kvor let out what could only be described as an amused chuff. Your warriors are unpredictable, dishonorable by our standards, and yet, his multifaceted eyes flicked to David, who had just entered alongside Ava. Your methods work. Vasquez gestured toward the holographic map of Perseus 9. Let's talk next steps. Kvor inclined his head. A ceasefire, a trial period of cooperation. But understand this, human. respect does not mean trust. We will watch you. Closely. David crosses arms. Fair enough. We'll be watching you too. The human factor. Later, in the colony's workshop, Sandy and Felix stood over the remains of David's battle-worn exo-rig. Sandy whistled. Man, I thought this thing would hold up longer. Felix adjusted his glasses. To be fair, it wasn't designed for hand-to-hand combat against an apex predator. Danny, leaning in the doorway, smirked. Bet we could upgrade it. Make it sleeker, faster. Maybe something with shock absorbers for when David gets punched through a wall next time. David, passing by, shot him a look. Next time? Danny shrugged. Come on, we both know this isn't the last time we'll have to prove humans are crazy. Sandy grinned. He's got a point. David sighed. They definitely had a point. The weight of victory. That night, under a star-choked sky, David and Ava walked the perimeter of the colony. It was quiet now, save for the occasional hum of security drones overhead. You scared me back there, Ava admitted. David glanced at her. You hit it well. She smiled, but there was something raw in her eyes. We were one mistake away from war. If you had lost, she shook her head. I don't think I could have watched that. David reached out, lacing his fingers with hers. Hey, I'm here. We made it. She exhaled. Yeah, we did. For a moment, there was just the comfort of silence. Then Ava smirked. Still, next time I'd appreciate it if you could find a way to save humanity without getting yourself punched by an alien warlord. David chuckled. I'll see what I can do. Epilogue. The first step. As dawn broke, Vasquez stood at the colony's main gate, watching as a small delegation of Equitheri warriors approached. Quor at the helm. This time, they weren't here for war. They were here to talk. David stood beside Vasquez, arms crossed. Think this'll last? Vasquez smirked. Does it matter? We'll adapt, just like we always do. Ava stepped forward to meet the Equitheri diplomats, voice steady. Let's build something better. And for the first time in the history of Perseus, 9, the humans and the Equitheri walked forward, together,